I set down this account while there remain persons living who may contradict me in lesser particulars, though none can contradict the thing itself. For what came upon me in the service stair of the county courthouse did not enter by rumor, nor by dream, nor by any fever of the blood, but stood before me in the hour when I had most need of there being no witness. It was the morning appointed for the televised hearing of the Innocence Commission, and I, Elena Marquez, then under consideration for an office of high public trust, stood alone upon the fourth-floor landing between the hearing room and the locked evidence archive below. My left hand was laid against the cold painted metal of the fire door, and in my right I had crushed against the brass button of my coat the folded statement by which I meant to confirm the sufficiency of old proceedings and the untroubled integrity of my own part in them. At my feet rested my black briefcase, upright and decorous as any officer of the court, and beneath the present files, beneath memoranda bearing dates of that very week, in the slit lining I had cut and never mended, lay the old, unmarked DVD. I remember the smallness of all things before they became immeasurable. The stair smelled, as such stairs do, of dust, old paint, the metal handrail touched by innumerable palms, and the damp mineral breath that concrete exhales before dawn. Beyond one heavy door came the smothered tumult of reporters, their shoes, their equipment, their impatience. Beyond another, the lift bells sounded with a mild civic regularity. Somewhere above, a bailiff coughed. Somewhere below, a cartwheel complained. The fluorescent tube over me flickered in its ordinary impoverished fashion, and I was glad of the poverty of that light, for I had made a companion of poor light in many years. Then the courthouse noise fell away. It did not cease as music ceases, nor diminish as a crowd recedes. It sank, rather, as though the whole building, with its judges, guards, advocates, cameras, clerks, petitioners, and condemned memories, had been lowered soundlessly under black water. The paper in my hand gave a little crackle, loud as ice. I heard my own breathing come short and unbeautiful. The tube above me did not go out, but narrowed until it seemed no lamp at all, only a pale judicial line drawn across the ceiling. The red light of the security camera, fixed high in the corner where I had never before bestowed more than a professional glance, blinked once. Then it remained open. I say open, though I know the poverty of the word. That small red bead, made by men to certify the comings and goings of other men, took on, without alteration of size, the intolerable patience of an eye that had never been closed. Its glow entered the stairwell not as light, but as attention. I felt it upon the side of my face, upon my gloved hand, upon the briefcase at my feet, and beneath the briefcase leather, upon the old disc in its paper sleeve. There came then a smell which had no warrant in that place, scorched paper, as from records burned before dawn, and wet stone, as from a tomb newly opened in rain, though no rain had fallen and no fire had been called. The hand upon the door lost strength. My other hand tightened until the folded statement bent and puckered under my thumb. I had the childish thought that if I could but open the door and step into the hearing room, with its microphones and oak railings and living witnesses, the common world would receive me back. But the door would not yield, or rather, I could not command my arm to move it. The air pressed flat against me. The shadows along the steps, which had lain carelessly beneath the rail, drew themselves away from the lower flight, as servants might withdraw from a threshold before the entrance of one greater than their master. I did not yet see any form. I heard no footfall. Yet from the turn of the stair below me there rose a stillness so complete, so possessed of intention, that my heart knew before my mind would sign its name to the knowledge. I was no longer alone. Out of the lower stair, between the fourth-floor landing where I stood and the locked archive door below, brightness gathered upright. I cannot say it entered. There was no opening sufficient for it, nor any motion by which a body might be measured. It became present, and the stairwell, which had been built by county contract and painted by county men, proved suddenly to have been all along a place in which such a presence could stand. It was tall, unmoving, and wrapped in ranks upon ranks of wings, not two, as painters flatter the eye, nor six only, as though number could bound that burning multitude, but innumerable, overlapping, ascending and descending through one another, each feather edged like a drawn knife of light. They did not beat. They did not need the air. Where a face should have been, my sight failed in pieces. I perceived, and lost, and perceived again, a dark seam of speaking flame where a mouth might be imagined, and above it a crown of small lidless eyes, opening and shutting in no rhythm the mind could keep. They were not arranged for beauty, nor for terror merely, but for witness. Some looked outward, more looked inward, and the worst of them seemed turned not upon my countenance, but upon the hidden architecture of my consent. Beneath and through that figure there moved slow wheels within wheels, not rolling upon the concrete, yet turning each rim alive with eyes, and those eyes did not search the stair, for they had already found what they were made to behold. The radiance was no warmth, it was weight. It laid itself upon my shoulders, upon my skull, upon my tongue. The cold door vanished from under my hand, or my hand from it. I do not know which. My knees struck the concrete with a sound that, in that emptied stare, seemed indecently human. The folded statement flew from me and slid down one step, then another, as though it too desired distance from my flesh. I tried to draw breath, and took in fireless burning. I tried to cry out, and made only a dry break in the throat. Then my hands, wiser than my will, rose and covered my eyes, yet covering did not avail. I saw the darkness of my palms, the red coursing within the lids, the brief trembling bones of my fingers, and behind them, before them, through them, the witness. I bent until my forehead nearly touched the landing, for the body, when the soul is arraigned, seeks the floor as its only remaining counsel. I thought, not in words, but as a creature thinks before it is slain, that if one more of those eyes opened upon me, the cord between breath and breast would snap. Then the seam of flame opened. Be not afraid. The words were calm, and because they were calm, they were more dreadful than thunder. They did not soothe the stairwell. They established it. They were old as foundations, exact as a seal, and in their utterance there was a mercy so severe that I understood it was spoken not to spare my dignity, but to prevent my perishing of the sight. My lungs, which had forgotten their office, obeyed. Air entered me like a reprieve granted under protest. I lowered my hands by the width of a finger. The figure remained, clothed in wings that shone with the sharpness of unsheathed judgment. The wheels turned with immense leisure. The small eyes opened and shut, and with every opening I felt some shuttered room within me lit and entered. It did not leer, it did not rage, it did not threaten as beasts threaten, having no hunger to feed by fear. Its terror was that it needed nothing from me, not confession, not belief, not permission, and yet knew me entire. Then I understood, though no name had yet been spoken aloud, that this was the open-eyed witness, Zariel of the last threshold, the watcher at the locked door, the sight remaining when all human witnesses have departed, the one already present in the pause after the hand has stolen, struck, lied, lusted, prayed, or withheld mercy in secret. Its eyes rested upon my briefcase, and I, who had stood that morning prepared to be confirmed before the nation, knew myself seen in the place where language had never entered. I know not by what surgery of light the thing was done, only that my hands, which had flown of themselves to my face, became no shelter, and my eyelids, though clenched till sparks swam in their blackness, were as thin as water before that seeing. My knees had found the concrete. My breath went from me in little mean petitions, not formed into words, and the brass button of my coat pressed a round ache into my palm, where my statement was crushed there, as though some poor seal of office might yet avail against a throne. "Be not afraid," said the voice, and because it was no comfort but command, I did not die. Then the stair opened. I do not say that the walls fell down, nor that the fourth floor of that courthouse was torn from its municipal fastenings. The paint remained its government color, the rail its cold iron, the fluorescent tube its paltry buzzing line. Yet all things were set transparent, without ceasing to be solid, and I saw, not with these eyes only, but with that inward faculty which men spend their lives in drugging with business, praise, and sleep. Beyond the fire door the reporters stood in their appointed impatience, smoothing their hair before cameras, whose red beads glowed like insects in a jar. In a women's room on the second floor, a clerk bent over a sink and wept without sound, having stamped, that morning, an order she knew would send a child back to a violent house. In holding, behind cinder block and steel, 2 men mouthed prayers into the crooks of their elbows, ashamed that another should perceive their fear. In the archive beneath me, sealed boxes rested in dusty ranks, and each box seemed not dead paper, but a lung, drawing in and holding the breath of perjury, of error, of mercy delayed until it had rotted into procedure. I saw the cameras also, the living, the dead, the painted domes that saw nothing, the lenses taped over during repairs, the blind corner by the freight elevator where a deputy once struck a prisoner and wrote that he had stumbled. I saw the places where men had trusted darkness, and darkness under that visitation had no office left. Corners unfolded, locked drawers gave up their inward faces. Shredded memoranda assembled themselves in the air, not as paper but as intention. Lies were not sentences only. They had weights, colors, temperatures. Some were blue and cold as old milk. Some stank of hot pennies. Some, long told, had grown a skin over them and looked almost like truth, until the eyes in those terrible wheels passed over them and the skin split. Last of all, because judgment is orderly and does not hurry to the wound before showing the body entire, I saw my own office as it had been 17 years before, the night glass black with my reflection, the lamp burning upon the motion files, the envelope mislaid, or said by me afterwards to have been mislaid. Though it lay plain beneath the inventory sheet, the unmarked disc in its paper sleeve, the convenience store clock bright in the corner of the picture, Marcus Reed, alive, ungainly, weary, buying cigarettes under a camera's indifferent stare, while another clock, in another part of the city, was already being made a scaffold for him. I thrust one hand toward my briefcase then, not to produce the thing, but to cover it, as a mother might cover a sick child from winter air. The gesture damned me before any word was spoken. For the eyes did not descend to the leather as men's eyes descend. They had been there when I cut the lining, there when I slid the sleeve within, there during every year I laid cleaner papers above it, there when I placed my hand upon Scripture and swore to uphold the law, there when I smiled into lights and was called principled. Nothing had been lost, nothing had been alone. The figure upon the stair did not advance. That was among its terrors. A beast must approach to do injury. A man must raise his voice to conquer contradiction. But this tall brightness, winged beyond numbering, needed only to remain, and the space between us became too narrow for a falsehood to stand upright. The feathers trembled not, yet each knife edge of light seemed to divide what I had mingled for my own safety. Fact from explanation, act from atmosphere, guilt from all its borrowed garments. The dark seam where a mouth should have been opened a little, and the words came forth without passion. March the 12th, it said, 17 years before this morning. 23 minutes after midnight. The envelope bore no prosecutor's mark, but the clerk's initials were upon the lower fold. The disc had no label. The recording within showed Marcus Reed at Harlan's Market, buying 1 pack of Newport cigarettes and a pint of milk. He paid with $3.48. He spoke to the cashier concerning rain that had not yet fallen. The store clock read 11:42 and 11 seconds. The death for which he was condemned was set by thy proof at 11:48. At this my mouth opened of its own cowardice. I heard myself say, "The police log." The words broke. They did not echo. They fell. I felt them strike the stair as brittle things and shatter there. "The patrolman's log was amended," said the witness, "and one of the wheels within it turned slowly, not round me but through me. Thou knewest the amendment. Thou sawest the first notation. The district attorney praised thy readiness the following morning. I was not led counsel then. Thou signed the response. I believed, thou feared. No thunder could have undone me as that last quiet correction did. Fear had been among my private exonerations, for men will forgive much to fear if it wears the badge of prudence. But in that mouth, fear itself stood stripped, not as trembling before danger, but as servitude before ambition. I saw my younger hand writing, in the clean phrase of office, that no exculpatory material responsive to the request was in the possession of the state. I saw the pen pause at the word possession and proceed. I saw my thumb upon the envelope's flap. I saw, with a nausea worse than memory, that I had not been confused. I had been deciding. The angel named the judge's chambers, where the discovery dispute was argued in 10 dry minutes before lunch. It named the victim's mother in the front row, her handkerchief balled white in her fist, and how I looked upon her grief and used it as one uses a wall to hide behind. It named the defense lawyer's shoes, split at the left sole, the way his voice cracked when he said there must be a tape, the laugh I permitted myself afterward in the hallway, when one of the deputies called him desperate. It named the jury's second question. It named the foreman rubbing his temple. It named Marcus Reed turning once, not toward me, but toward the back of the courtroom where his child sat too small for the bench, drawing circles on a program she could not read. "Stop," I said, or thought I said. My tongue felt thick, ungiven, but the naming went on, not cruelly and therefore more terrible. Cruelty has limits. It tires, it feeds upon response. It may be despised. This knowledge neither fed nor tired. It merely was. It set down the day of sentence, the newspaper clipping I kept, and then burned, the first time I moved the disc from a drawer to a safe. The year I cut the briefcase lining with a kitchen knife, because an ethics inquiry had begun in another matter, and I had learned what rummaging hands could find. The evening Marcus Reed died in prison infirmary air, his lungs filling while my office celebrated a Conviction Integrity Award. The condolence I did not send, because sending it would imply a tie between us. The daughters' petitions, each answered with the cold formality that had become my shelter and my craft. Again I tried to speak. Others knew the case was flawed. The lidless crown above the burning seam opened in such number that the stair seemed seeded with dawn. I bowed my head. Yet the sight was inside my bowing. Name not others before thyself. I did not kill him. No. I did not strike the victim. No. I did not forge the clock. No. Each no was a mercy and an indictment, for it left me no refuge in crimes I had not committed, and drove me back toward the one I had. I had desired, absurdly, that the angel accuse me falsely, that I might gather myself around some offended innocence. But it would not grant me even that poor evasion. It would not call me worse than I was. It would not call me clean. The disc in my briefcase seemed then to possess a gravity of its own. I felt it through the leather, through the files laid over it, through the slit cloth I had so often smoothed with the palm of a woman whose public hands were praised as steady. The old sleeve lay there, thin as a wafer, thick as a grave. Beneath all my titles, assistant prosecutor, bureau chief, judge, nominee, there had been this small concealed circle, and around it my life had learned to orbit. Azrael's wheels turned inward. Every eye upon them was not searching for what it lacked, but beholding what it already possessed. "What didst thou do?" it asked, "when no man watched?" There, upon that fourth-floor landing, with the hearing room waiting above, and the evidence archive locked below, I found that the thing I had most dreaded was not exposure to the nation, nor prison, nor disgrace, nor the faces of colleagues when their praise curdled in their mouths. It was the plainness of the answer. I had wanted the conviction. I had wanted the assent that followed it. I had taken a man's living alibi and made of it a buried object, because the truth would have broken the path I had chosen for myself. The words gathered in me like blood behind a bandage, yet still I did not speak them. Then was shown to me, not as prophecy, for no trumpet announced it, nor as dream from my knees yet hurt upon the concrete, the two passages that remained before my feet. They were not set far off in mist, but near as the two doors of that service stair. Through the upper door lay the hearing room, varnished and bright, with its seal upon the wall and its microphones standing like small black reeds before the places of power. My prepared statement waited there in the fold of my hand, bruised but legible. Sentences of confirmation, of institutional confidence, of regretted imperfections in old cases, of the solemn burden of public trust. I saw myself read it. My voice would steady by the second paragraph. The governor's counsel would incline his head. The commissioners, who wished no conflagration on a morning already given to cameras, would receive my assurance, as men receive a plank thrown over a chasm. Marcus Reed would remain, in the public books, a murderer. His daughter, seated behind counsel with her folder worn soft at the corners from years of being opened and refused, would leave with one more denial pressed upon the others. My office would survive me. My portrait would be hung. Men would speak of my restraint, and the disc would remain where it lay, seeing me. Through the lower passage, though it led in body only to the archive, I saw the other course. I saw my hand open the briefcase. I saw the old sleeve, unmarked and yellowing, placed upon the hearing table as gently as if it were a relic or a charge of powder. I saw the room fail to understand, then understand all at once. Cameras turning, counsel rising. The governor's staff whitening with anger not yet permitted a name. I saw bar complaints, indictments perhaps, the pensioned dignities of my life, taken down and examined like garments, after a drowning. I saw every case to which my signature had been affixed called back beneath suspicion's lamp. I saw my mother's photograph beside headlines. I saw friends discover duties elsewhere. I saw Marcus Reed, who could not breathe again, receiving at last only the poor tardy coin of a corrected record, and his daughter receiving it from the hand that had robbed her. One road preserved the lie and slew again what was already dead. One road told the truth and did not raise the dead. There was no passage by which I might carry both my name and his, no adjournment, no sealed sidebar, no committee phrase, no private memorandum placed discreetly in a sympathetic hand. I had lived many years in the middle country of delay, where a thing not spoken might pretend not to be chosen. But beneath the eyes of Azrael, that country was burned off the map. Refusal had a shape, silence had a signature, waiting was an act, and the hour before dawn had written it down. The stair itself seemed to bend beneath the account, not mine only. The clerk's tear, the deputy's blow, the judge's impatience, the child's circles on the program, the smoke of burned clippings, the hidden seam in my briefcase, the pulse in Marcus Reed's throat as he stood beneath sentence. All of it present, all of it weighed, not confused into one great darkness, but distinguished, preserved, unbearable because particular. I lifted my face toward that living brightness, and in the crown of small, lidless eyes I beheld no hatred. That was worse. Hatred might have excused my trembling. What looked upon me was fidelity. It had seen. It would not forget. It would not look away. Then the burning seam in that countenance, if countenance it may be called, wherein no human countenance was contained, opened wider than speech, and yet spoke with that restraint which is more dreadful than thunder. For there was in it neither haste nor wrath, as men spend wrath, but the settled knowledge of an officer who hath all warrants already sealed. Elena Marquez, it said, and my name, passing through that fire, came back to me not as the garment I had worn before committees and cameras, but as the naked thing beneath it. Stand where thou hast stood. Answer not for precinct, office, party, judge, nor master. Name first the hand that hid the eye. I would have answered. God knoweth I would have made some structure of words wherein I might have lived a little longer. I had been young. The file had been crowded with worse confusions. The detectives had sworn their confidence. The victim's kin had looked to me as to a wall against chaos. The district attorney had wanted no tremor in the case. The law itself, in its many rooms and locked drawers, had seemed to invite a prudent silence. These thoughts rose in me like advocates springing from benches, but as each came forward, the eyes upon the wheels turned inward, and the thought beheld itself, and shriveled. The stair was not large enough to contain even one lie. Zariel of the last threshold stood upon the step below, though no step bent under that brightness, and the wings did not stir. Nevertheless I heard, all about me, the faint cutting sound of feathers laid edge to edge, like papers severed by an unseen clerk. The innumerable eyes upon the crown opened and shut without pattern, yet none slept. Some seemed fixed upon my face, some upon my hands, some upon the black briefcase at my feet, and some, more terrible than all, upon that place in me where I had long kept, under names serviceable and cool, the small locked chamber of my triumph. I cannot unmake what hath been made, said the angel. I cannot call unwitnessed what was seen. I cannot pronounce clean the deed that carried its stain before the foundations had dried beneath thy feet. I can speak the true name of the thing thou hast buried, once, and the covering shall no more cover it. If thou wilt have it, first confess with thine own mouth what thou didst when thou wast alone. At that word alone, the red light of the security camera above the landing burned steadily, not brighter, yet more awake. And I knew, with a knowledge that entered by the bones before it reached the mind, that no chamber had ever been empty in which I had congratulated myself upon privacy. The locked office, the sealed envelope, the late hour, the corridor after the verdict, the ladies' room where I had washed my hands and looked long at my own dry eyes. All were present in that narrow place, assembled without noise. I bent then, not as one choosing nobly, but as one whose sinews have at last ceased contending against the iron. My fingers, being numb and clumsy, could scarce unfasten the briefcase. The brass clasps snapped open with a poor domestic sound. I drew out the neat current files, the talking points, the correspondence from the governor's council, and cast them upon the concrete as a woman might cast garments from a burning bed. Beneath them lay the lining, black upon black, but I knew the slit by touch, for my hand had visited it many times in dreams and never in waking until that morning. The seam tore with a small, vicious rasp. From it I drew the unmarked paper sleeve, yellowed at the edge, and within that sleeve the disk, dull as a dead moon. I held it in both hands. It was light. That lightness nearly slew me. "Speak," said Zariel, and the room diminished until there was only the stair, the angel, the hidden eye in my hands, and my breath coming up in broken portions. I lifted my face as far as I could bear. "I condemned Marcus Reed," I said, and the words struck the concrete and remained there, because winning mattered more to me than his life. Then the dark seam flared, not in approval, nor in pardon, but in awful recognition, and the voice of the open-eyed witness gave back the true name of my concealed thing. I shall not set it down here entire. It was shorter than any plea, and heavier than any sentence. When it entered me, the years in which I had hidden were gathered up like a single page and read. After that, the brightness began to withdraw, though not by motion such as bodies use. Rather, the stairwell, which had been unable to hold him, was permitted by degrees to be only itself again. The wheels within wheels receded first, their inward-looking eyes diminishing as stars at dawn diminish, not because they are quenched, but because the poorer light of day resumes its tyranny over human sight. The wings folded inward without closing. Rank after rank of keen feathers passed into the tall stillness, and the shadows, which had knelt away from those feet, crept back under the rail and along the broken paint, like guilty servants returning after the master's departure. Yet before he was gone, I perceived one thing which I cannot forget and cannot make useful. Zariel bore away from that landing no relic that could be catalogued, no mark upon stone, no ash of celestial burning. He carried from me the names by which I had endured myself: pressure, discretion, strategy, immaturity, good faith, burden of office. They rose from me as pale scraps of paper drawn toward flame, and where they had been there remained no substitute ready to my hand. The fluorescent tube above resumed its mean flicker. The smell of scorched paper thinned, and there came back the odor of dust, metal rail, damp stone, and the courthouse coffee borne under doors by the currents of ventilation. From beyond the fire door broke suddenly the whole vulgar music of the morning. Elevators striking their floors, reporters speaking over one another, a bailiff calling my name with increasing impatience, the low cough of microphones tested and retested before the public spectacle. I stood. My knees had taken the grit of the landing and showed it darkly through the cloth. In one hand I held the folded confirmation statement, crushed but still legible. In the other, the sleeve containing the DVD. I remember thinking, with a lucidity almost cruel, that my hair was not in order, that my mouth was dry, that the cameras would not forgive a tremor, and that this also did not matter enough to save me. When I opened the fire door, the noise smote me like weather. The hearing room turned by fractions. Counsel first, then commissioners, then staff, then the patient black eyes of lenses. Marcus Reed's daughter sat at the front table with her folder of denials worn soft at the corners. I went to her before I went to the microphone and placed the missing disc upon the wood before her hands. "My name is Elena Marquez," I said, the confirmation notes still folded in my fist, and I hid this. Every red recording light in the room burned toward me. They were not the only eyes now open.